All right, thank you all for joining us on our road mapping track, building the 2024 plus Filecoin roadmap. Excited to have you all here. This is gonna be a very interactive track and session, so everyone get ready, get some juices firing. We're gonna have some music, we're gonna do a lot of stuff. Yeah, if you're not already caffeinated, get some caffeine because get ready, it's gonna be awesome. Here is our agenda. We are gonna try and end early, which then is going to allow us to put our recap from this track into the recap slide deck in the 15 minutes between this track and the closing, which also happens in here right after this. So this is our agenda. Our goal is to stay on time. We're gonna have a 10-minute talk from Juan on how to roadmap and how to think about road mapping. I'll briefly introduce StarMap, which is a tool that we've created for doing this, which we are gonna be using today. Then we're gonna do a group test all together very quickly just to get to know the tool. Then we are going to talk a little bit about themes and categories and how to break down the many different aspects of how we as a community want to be improving Filecoin over the next multiple years. Then we're going to iterate and work on brainstorming milestones into those themes together as a group. Then we're going to hopefully break out. I've blessed a couple of our lovely track leads with theme ownership. Hopefully folks are willing to step up. Otherwise we'll iterate in flight. And then we will literally build our roadmap for real in StarMaps during the last 20 minutes of this. And then we'll be sharing back and retroing on anything that did not work well. And so that's our agenda, and we are getting started with Juan.
All right, so we've been working on this stuff for a while now, and we've been working on a lot of different projects across many communities. Our projects probably span, I think tens of thousands of repos we counted, and tens to hundreds of thousands of people contributing in many different degrees, most of those contributing a little bit, and hundreds to thousands of organizations working across these projects with their own goal sets, their own priorities, and so on. So we've tried a lot of things throughout this entire period. We've tried a lot of things in terms of road mapping, and we've learned a lot about the kinds of things that work or don't work. One really important thing for everyone to remember is that teams have different requirements, nuances, and preferences for their own internal roadmaps. Nevertheless, users and communities need some way of interacting and understanding what things are going on. So a big part of this is decoupling what is a roadmap that is the working, low-level, zoomed-in version of a roadmap for a team from the external-facing roadmap for a broader community. And here, internal-external just means within that team and broadly with their users. That team could be a team composed of many different people from many different companies or whatever. So we've arrived at a set of requirements and a kind of a protocol for inter-team and user-focused roadmaps. So we've, again, want to create a structure that enables a lot of organizations to participate together. And one of the things that's most important here is making sure that these things stay maintained. The only thing worse than not having a roadmap is having an outdated, broken roadmap that confuses everyone. That's strictly worse than not having a roadmap. So because people start depending on that roadmap that they see, and then they're like, wait, hold on, but I thought this was going to happen. So very important to maintain and upkeep the roadmap. So you have to get to structures that are self-updating because you don't want to create things that get out of date really quickly. So over the years, we've studied and tried tons of different tools, and we've been inspired by many good road mapping efforts. And one of the things that we tune for is roadmaps that use tools and computers to try and do a lot of the heavy lifting in figuring out dependencies, tracking completion, and so on, and sort of like reporting. So the guiding principle that we have for this road mapping now is to think of different zoom levels. You have and the same thing applies for normal maps, normal road maps in the world, right? Like you have you use one type of roadmap if you want to understand how you're going to travel from one country to another. You use a very different roadmap at a different zoom level if you want to know how you're going to get from one room to another room in the building, or from one building to another building in the city. So in the same way, think of having different roadmaps that are focused to different communities, different users of the roadmap. So unlike the physical layout of the world that is kind of neatly collapsed into 3 dimensions, and you can have something like that zooms in and out very neatly, teams tend to want to have very different tool sets for their own road mapping. So something we've learned along the way is like, don't try and force everybody to use the same road mapping tool. Never going to work. Everyone's going to use whatever tool they like the most that year, and that'll change. Instead, enable people to have their low-level zoomed-in views of their own roadmaps, but then give some set of standardized structures for the higher-level zoomed-out views that users depend on. One key thing there is to be able to like draw dependencies between those things. So think of like, this is an example drawn from FVM specifically. So you have, starting in like the lowest zoom level, a detailed engineering breakdown of what the team was going to be doing. You have a broad high-level plan that then gets used with other stakeholders in the project. Then you have an even more zoomed out version of that, which is the broad user roadmap that other groups and other communities are going to depend on. And that's the main thing that people talk about when they say the FVM roadmap. When most people say the FVM roadmap, they mean that. Most of the team in the FVM team, when they say roadmap and what they're doing, they tend to mean Zoom 4 or Zoom 5 in terms of what they're worried about. But the broad community uses Zoom 3. Now that itself gets aggregated and put into this higher level thing, like Zoom level 2, of like how that gets connected to other tracks, and even that gets zoomed out into like a multi-year, very simple thing. One general kind of like rule of thumb for roadmaps is if you put way too much information in a roadmap, it's going to get out of date really fast. It's going to confuse, and it's not going to be as useful as you think it will be. And so instead, think of where the information belongs. Does it belong in the zoomed out view? Does everybody need to know about this? Or is it information that should be detailed and granular for a lower level roadmap? So the kind of like roadmap structure that most benefits kind of communication across teams is this kind of user level roadmap. That's what kind of enables a team or a project or a service to describe the set of things that they're going to be working on. You can tune the wording there to be very concrete in terms of what it's delivering to the user experience, what it's unlocking over time. You want to kind of pick really good milestone names that kind of describe what's going to transform in terms of the capability set, and so on. So this kind of roadmap is extremely useful. We lacked a lot of these roadmaps in the past, and in the last year or two, we've built up a lot of these, and we now have a lot of the pieces of these kinds of roadmaps. However, we need something. So now we're like, our need is somewhere higher level. The thing that we're struggling with is that we need to cross-link across these roadmaps per teams to talk about broader initiatives that are cross-cutting across many teams that involve a set of milestones. This is where we have a lot of community or project debt, where we don't have good roadmaps. So when people say, hey, we want a roadmap, and the answer is like, oh yeah, here's our roadmap, what they usually mean is, how does this connect with that other thing over there and that other thing, and when can I finally do X, where X is like some combination of these things. And so that's kind of what we're gonna be working on today. So now, these Zoom levels seems like a lot of maintenance work, right, in terms of pros. This is why we built a tool to enable that linking, and it's built on top of something that you all know and hopefully love, GitHub issues. And so we built a way of visually mapping the roadmap structure on top of GitHub issues. It's inspired by a bunch of other tools that have done similar things in the past, but we wanted to capture this recursive structure because GitHub milestones or GitHub roadmaps don't quite do this. And those tools don't quite work for our purposes. So we're just using the issues here. And so we're going to be building these kind of like sub-ecosystem roadmap layers. Now, some teams might choose a time here to work on their kind of like Zoom level 3 type user roadmap. Some groups are going to be working on cross-cutting sub-ecosystem roadmaps. The broader goal that we should have together is to do this one, the interlinking of the broad initiatives. So the tool that we built is called Star Maps, and it relies on just using a GitHub issue to describe the milestones that you're going to include. So it's a very simple format. You have one issue, you describe the children, and that creates the dependency linking and the linear kind of layout like this. So if you were to represent the FEM roadmap in Star Maps, you would just kind of create one single issue that would link in these other issues. So the milestone 0 issue, the milestone 0.5 issue, the milestone 1, and so on. And you are now, whoever wrote that is like now the creator of that issue. They kind of assign it to themselves. They become the maintainer. People in the world know who's on the hook for updating that roadmap until they assign it to somebody else. And you get the inbuilt issues conversation tracking, which is really valuable around these roadmaps. You can ask questions, you can subscribe to it, you can get notifications and whatnot. So you get all of the benefits of the GitHub issues tracking thing. But you can now also take that entire roadmap, that FVM roadmap, and treat it as one item in a higher level roadmap. Or if you need to dig into specific goals, you could have a different roadmap that includes some of the milestones of FVM, but some of the other things over there. And that's how you describe the how am I going to achieve X, where X includes some combination of different things across other roadmaps. That's how we can capture the kind of description across teams. Molly, do you want to demo Star Maps?
Awesome. So yeah, this is Star Maps. If you want, you can grab the QR code, and it has a nice README on the front page that describes how to use it and capabilities and issue formatting and 10,000 questions you might have about actually making use of it. So I'm going to give people half a second who are holding phones. We're going to have a lot of QR codes, so get ready. The general way that Star Maps works, as Quan was mentioning, is it's all GitHub issue powered. So you create a conformant issue, and then you can load the URL of that issue into the Star Maps little GitHub issue browser, and it will pull up a roadmap based on and described by the content inside of your issue body. There's a couple of optional fields and a couple of mandatory fields. Description is optional, but it just gives you a little bit more information about what this thing is. ETA is mandatory. You have to have an ETA, even if it's a theme. Describe when all of the things within this are going to get done and the output or the next state is going to be achieved. I've actually added maintainer. That's not an official part of the Star Map format, but it allows you to have a field that you can update inside of the issue body. Not everyone can, in say Filecoin project, set assignees of an issue to people, and so this is just a slightly easier way to keep track of constraints. And then you have, we're now using the GitHub task list, which came out of beta a little while ago, and this is where you can add each of the different sub-milestones within your roadmap. And so this is where you normally are going to add a series of GitHub links to other issues that you are describing for milestone 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. And the thing that I've done that I find very useful is also linking to the Star Map representation within the issue, which allows you to very easily and quickly hop back and forth between your Star Map view and representation, and then the issue that describes the Star Map, and back and forth. So someone who's looking at your issue and maybe making comments can easily go and open it up in the Star Map visualization.
Yeah, question for the task list milestones checkboxes. Does the Star Map software look for all that stuff in a code block?
Yes, it looks for this task list. There is another version that's implemented where you could have children : and then it'll grab all of those child nodes.
GitHub tracking?
No, this task list is a GitHub feature.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
I should use GitHub.
So here's some of, this is a slightly older version, but here's how you can see these different things coming into play. So you have your root one. This is one I created for the NDRES team back at the beginning of this year that had 3 themes within it for critical system stewardship, scalable compute over state and data, and robust storage and retrieval. And then each one of those was their own GitHub issue, which had a set of children within those. And then how this rendered is you'd have a top-level theme, and you'd have all of the milestones within that theme as described by that other issue. If you want to check it out, there's a QR code. You can view that star map and see under the hood. Each one of these things, you can click and open up the GitHub issue associated with it. You can add a comment to that subchild. You can be like, hey, I have a new thing. Can you include my thing in the top-level theme or even the top-level roadmap if there's another thing to add there? So we're using the power of GitHub issues to make this interactive and updatable. Another example from the station team is how they're using different views of the same content. And so I was showing you before kind of the overview where it has all of the different items within it. There's also a list view, like the one Juan was showing of FVM, which can just show a set of milestones in time as more of a list. And so there's these different views that work for roadmaps of different types. Actually, previously, I think I was showing the detailed view because that's where it'll show you with these like theme categories pulled out all of the sub-items of those themes.
And by the way, because all of this is on GitHub issues and follows the standard format, you can write a nicely rendered version of this for your website, right? So the FEM website has a very stylized view of a roadmap. That right now is a pain to update because it's a separate thing. That should just be linked to the GitHub issue so that it automatically renders that roadmap according to like what the latest view is.
Another example is that these are composable. So, we're describing here's the station roadmap. Some of those station items are in the NDRES roadmap, and then some of those same children, this is an example of pulling them out from the themes and creating a slightly more zoomed in view. I created a version back at the beginning of the year. Again, example of an out-of-date roadmap that I have not maintained, but pulled out the various different items that were, from my vantage point, some exciting things for 2023 in Filecoin land, and was able to generate a roadmap of all of those different milestones. Okay, so that's our tooling. So far, so good. Let's do a group test. This is just to make sure that you can create an issue in the repo that we're going to use later on, that you know how to create a conformant star map issue, and you can view and visualize it in star map. And so I have gone ahead and created a roadmap repo inside of Filecoin project where we're going to be doing this. There are two different types of issue templates. There's the test issue template that generates a test one that has this handy little green thing so that I can delete them later easily. And then there's the real one. For now, please use test. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and generate a lot of test items and link them into this test post FIL Dev roadmap issue just as testing. And so my prompt to you is grab this QR code, go in here to the test roadmap node, click get started, write a title related to some action item to do next step out of the FIL Dev Summit that you want to do in the world. And you can even have subtasks within that, which might be, hey, I want to go make this thing happen, and here are the various different sub pieces. You can decide whether or not you want to just list them as, to do, or if you want to also create additional child issues that you are linking to here. That will show things off more if you do that. But yes, this is our prompt, and this is what we're going to do together for the next 5 minutes.
If you add children issues, I would recommend you just link to ones that already exist or something, so you can just see how it works as opposed to having to create a lot of them right now because it's a quick test.
Yeah, you only have 5 minutes. So yeah, try and link to things you already have. Good point. All right. Woo! We have a lot of issues. Eat all the hot dogs in Iceland. Make a Zelda project. Ship IPCGA. Granite. IPC beta. Take over the world. Present at Lab Week. Affect the butterfly. Awesome. Get Juan elected president.
No.
Oh my
no,
gosh.
thank you.
Maybe of
President of what?
Yeah. President of all the hot dogs in Iceland.
There you go.
And some of these are their own issues, and we can link into them, which is pretty cool. So when they turn blue, that's what we're seeing there. Present at Lab Week has, is recursive maybe?
No, oh yeah, baby.
Yeah, brilliant.
Clever.
Smart human. All right, check. We did the first thing. You had 5 minutes. You guys clearly know how to use the tool now. We're all good. Oh, and we're going to now play this video again. Oh, and I updated this already, and so we got to see it. So this is our test item, which now has all of those handy little issues within it. And that's how it's populating the star map with all of the items inside of it. Back to our agenda. The way I was thinking that we would do this for Filecoin is that we would break down the world into some domains a little bit so that we could have those handy themes, and we can, not try and have one kind of like all over the place roadmap, but we can break down into some subdomains and areas and talk about the improvements that we want to make in those themes.
It's okay if in that area you have to-dos for you that are not yet issues. You can just, they're not an issue yet, it's just an item, and then later you can go back and turn it into an issue in the future. The valuable thing of doing this in groups is that we can get the hard part, which is that cross-cutting group thing done together, and then the individual teams can go flesh out their own roadmaps later. But doing the hard thing of the cross themes together is the key thing.
Yep. I know we started, and I looked through the Miro brainstorm. There wasn't a whole lot in there, and so I spent a little bit of time trying to draft some high-level themes that I think are relatively comprehensive over the many different things I've heard so far over the last 3 days here and the previous FIL Dev Summit in terms of the areas of improvement that things kind of break down into. There's things related to community growth, bringing more people into the ecosystem, related to economic tooling, DeFi and DEXs, and new like token improvements, things related to security, observability, infrastructure, related to growing the amount of capacity and hardware that we can onboard into the network, onboarding more storage and making that storage more useful and more accessible to people, increasing retrievability, increasing data sustainability and repair and like reliability, doing data programmability and compute, and adding kind of like more smart contract interactions into the data layers of Filecoin, and then also scaling the network, helping enable more L2s and other networks to interact really strongly with Filecoin. My question is, can people think of some areas that I'm missing or that aren't what might fall into this other category that might not be encompassed well here? Because we're about to do a brainstorm of all of the sub things that we've heard inside those different themes. Claudia. Deletion and more snap types. I think I had around sustainability repair. I'd also been sticking deletion in there.
Yeah, why don't I just call it out?
Sure. What do you mean by more snap types? Yeah, I think I had snapping related to this.
Maybe just add snapping explicitly.
Well, this is the doc that we're about to go in. Okay, I have resnap here also in repair, sustainability, deletion, snap,
Yeah.
resnap.
Yeah.
Good one.
Other suggestions? Back there?
Where would payments
And effectively like
Economic tooling?
deal payment, or it could be in data storage, utility, accessibility.
Yeah,
onboarding
somewhere.
data,
It might
focus
end
on-
up in both. Like, star maps can do that.
Deal payment.
Yeah.
Angela? Compliance?
Yeah, like SOC 2 and other certifications. Yeah, and I would probably add verifiable claims in there. So
Data fair.
there was another hand. Yep.
usability, it would be nice if we stored our own blockchain on an IPFS CID.
Yes, 100%.
Yes. I stuck that one in the tooling and infra and storing
Great.
Filecoin and Filecoin. I'm still thinking about compliance.
Killen?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think it was community growth.
Faster block time?
That was here,
Yeah.
or it could be here. Yeah, true.
Yeah,
I think
so,
we would
so
put it
the
there as
yellow
well.
parts are not extensive. We're trying to get the categories down so we can then go into documents. I think let's just move to the documents.
It's network scalability. Block time is also related to scalability, right? Compliance?
Or
I think it's
storage
or
utility.
storage utility.
Storage utility.
Okay.
But don't worry, like you can put it in both places.
Yeah. Retrieval incentive, retrievability.
Or both.
I mean, economic tooling, at least so far, is more around DeFi indexes, but
Yeah, I was just showing something.
yeah.
Not even both. All right, I think we have the categories. We haven't heard anything. If there's one missing, we'll find it.
Okay.
Let's shift to the document, I guess.
Yeah, we'll shift to the document in a second. I just wanted to highlight that there are, this isn't the only way to think about doing this roadmap. And I think we should have other versions that reuse a lot of these same children that are, say, more functional or project-based roadmaps, say one specifically focused on network upgrades for next year and what is landing in each quarter's network upgrade, or project roadmap focused on a specific project. But from my vantage point, I think a theme-based roadmap is going to be really useful in this context while we're all together and when we're talking to people outside of Filecoin who want to know about those capabilities upgrading.
Creating some of the ones in 29 might also be really useful while we're here. For example, like Filecoin Plus is cross-cutting, and you might want to have people. Can you add
Here.
Filecoin Plus in here? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So these are also great things to create, and I would highly encourage you to create these. Tracks also can have roadmaps, and I would encourage you to create a roadmap, all track leads related to your track if you have time. Okay, but this is the next step that we're going to do. We're going to brain dump milestones into these themes. And so I've created a Google Doc that has a category for each of the things that we just talked about. And I've pre-populated it with some of the things that I've heard.
QR code.
Yes, here's your QR code. But here, think of all the things that you've heard about, all the things that you're wishing to see in the world, as granular as you can, focused on here's the upgrade step, not necessarily all the subtasks within it, but again, trying to
You mean as coarse as you can?
not like Filecoin works.
Pick the
or
right
something.
level of coarseness here.
Yeah.
We want to tune for having somewhere between 5 and 15 items, not 100
5 and 15 per
category.
Yeah. And each one of these is going to be viewable in its own right. And so you can look at the community upgrade roadmap or the economic upgrade roadmap, which is going to be cool.
Some of the anonymous animals or fruits may want to go down to the ones in the bottom, because otherwise we're going to flesh out the first two categories, but not the bottom.
Yep. We're gonna just start. We have, I think I gave us 10 minutes for this. Check. We are getting very close. We might even be ahead of schedule. Good news. I think we'll blaze through some of these theme DRIs, and then we really want to walk you through the main meat of this session, which is going from this brainstorm that we have into real roadmaps for each theme, and then a meta roadmap that looks across all of the themes. It's going to be exciting. We've been talking so far about theme DRIs. Effectively, each theme is a GitHub issue. It lists a set of child issues. The DRI or maintainer of that root issue is kind of responsible for helping make sure it stays updated, and in this case, gets created in the first place in the roadmap repo. Good thing we all tested that, so we know that everyone has access here, which is great. What we're about to do is we're going to break up by theme and go from this draft that we've brainstormed in Google Docs into actually making a roadmap. Request to these theme DRIs to work with and help coordinate a group of others to build the child items and the tree structure of the roadmap that fits within that theme. You can use all of the stuff that we've just crowdsourced into these documents to help inform those roadmaps. And I would recommend starting there in the Google Doc, making the tree structure, deduping, and then assigning sub-owners within your team, as we group up, to then create the child items or find existing child items in various different repos related to say, hackathon, creating hackathons or.
Just to summarize, or like sort of to re-hit those points with seeing this, you want to look through that together. You want to group the related things that should probably be a sub-bullet. Think of, creating sub-bullets as a way to create the tree structure that we're going to end up materializing on GitHub later. And then assign a DRI there to each item that is then going to go and create that issue and write the description. And you want to, in the description, you want to very clearly say why we want that and have as much info there as you want, as you need. And by the way, if you already know that some of these are existing issues and you kind of are actively involved and it's okay, then link the real issue there. You don't need to create a new one. That's kind of the goal here. It's like you can link the actual real issues that you're using to implement the stuff. But if you don't have that yet, no worries, we can create it here together.
Request, let's try not to do 2 layers of themes. So I love that the economic tooling and ZX, we're doing some grouping by theme here. But what that will end up looking like in star maps is we'll have our themes, and then you'll have more themes, and you won't actually have the milestones themselves visible in that layer of the roadmap. It's not.
There is a view that does 2 levels.
It does 2 levels, but not 3.
I see, okay.
And so here you might want to have upgrading consensus pledge design within your main section and not have it as a sub-child of another issue that is protocol level changes, which isn't a milestone in and of itself. So try and, in this context, as you guys are doing things, try and avoid themes, try and focus on milestones, milestone dependencies, milestone grouping. We did add a section in here, which is known dependencies. So if you know of dependencies for getting this thing done, you can list them here. They don't yet get shown up in the star maps view, but we're going to harness that information for later.
Wait, isn't that?
Dependencies are not a thing yet.
Yeah, but
Sorry?
Can you consider a change request where themes could have sub-themes in a visible, usable way? Because these themes are pretty big, incremental.
You can create theme item. Yeah, you can do it. I'm just going to choose all of your child items instead because that way they're going to show up in this project level roadmap, and you can then have those as well. You can do a multi-inclusionary masterpiece.
So the real work has some structure. We're trying to map onto the real structure. So do what makes sense, but just take into account the overhead in maintaining tons of items. And so just like we mentioned before, unmaintained things kind of suck. And so just be wary of adding way too much detail, way too many items. We want to flesh this out, but we don't want to go so deep that then it becomes kind of extremely difficult to maintain. Mm-hmm. Do you want the people, the DRIs to stand up so that the people can go to them?
Sure. Maybe just really quickly, I'm hopeful that these theme DRIs are going to last longer than here so that we can keep these things updated in the future. However, handoffs are supported and encouraged and perfectly fine. I know not everyone who is responsible for these areas is in this room at this moment. I really appreciate everyone who has volunteered to be a DRI. That is not a commitment forever, but please help me enable that handoff to a better person over time so that we can more broadly distribute the work of keeping this roadmap accurate and up to date as we go along. And then I'm really hopeful that we're going to be able to present this roadmap in future sessions and summits in the future. Just as a quick reminder, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to take the Filecoin Community Roadmap number 1. Each of you, theme DRIs, is going to create one root issue, which my roadmap is then going to link to, and then your new issue is going to link to all of the milestones and sub-milestones that are included within that, and then it'll show up in the area. Yes?
So and ask when you make that issue for your themes, just link it in the document so we can grab it from there. Just link it here, make this thing a link to that issue, and then we'll grab it from there. Because that way, Molly can grab it from there for her issue, and then the people in your table can grab it from there
to edit it. Yeah, makes
to edit
sense.
it, yeah.
George and then Marco and then Deep.
Yeah, so these seem really long. So, and this is 2024 plus. So we should put ETAs in 2025 as well, or just
we can.
2025?
Yeah, if you think it's going to be 2025, put 2025. ETAs are rough, like they move around. This is just our best guess at the current moment. And you do need to have an ETA, otherwise you're going to get a little warning bar in the star map, and apologies that my template does not have the right number of year digits, but I'm sure we can problem solve around that.
All right, we're going to close out the session and then move to closing soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys all so much. First, give yourself a round of applause. This is what we have created. We now have our top-level Filecoin Community Roadmap issue. It links to these themes. Each of these themes has milestones within it. Make sure that these individual milestones each have their own ETA in the issue, otherwise they're not going to show up at the top level. So we have one for data programmability and compute, which has some FVM and native WASM and addressing pain points milestones. We have some community growth around events in Asia and case studies and our upcoming FIL Vegas and some other great things. Data sustainability, repair, deletion. Right now there's a FIP for direct data onboarding built-in actors, and I'm sure more to come. Capacity growth, increasing utility, POREP optimizations, and solidifying the SP onboarding documentation. That'll help a lot. Data storage utility, we have got some dstore REST API beta and general availability, some awesome FIL Plus allocator improvements, and some Lotus and Boost access optimizations. Retrievability, we've got RetrievalBot v2, Motion, Spark, IPNI, and some Saturn stuff. We got security and observability, having a public dashboard for Filecoin nodes, cheaper access to archival data, better archival nodes, and better snapshotting. Awesome. Network scalability. We got fast finality. We've got launching the IPC L2, a lot of other subnet explorers and multi-subnet explorers. Data. There we go. All good. Sound protocol economics, TVL of Filecoin, finding PNF and attracting more capital, and novel ways to pay for data and storage. And so all of this comes together into our handy-dandy theme-based star map with all of these things getting allocated into time. And some of these even have some completion items. So booyah. And we have DRIs to continue improving and adding onto these and potentially handing DRI off to other people over time. But let's try and keep utilizing and improving this as a resource for the community.
And we're going to work on the display of this. So of course, this is hard to see and visualize and so on. We're going to be working on some tooling to enable us to better visualize that overall top thing, to get it closer to the kinds of things that we have been inspired by. Where is it? We'll work on getting things to look visually closer to things like this, so we can use the infrastructure that we're building, those GitHub issues, to then render updatable versions of these kinds of things. Because, for example, that roadmap that Vitalik made for ETH2, that is a huge pain to update because that is manual. And that is out of date, and you don't have a good one that's updated. We want to be able to create the structure that will enable us to make that kind of thing, but be updatable in time based on real GitHub issues tracking.
Each layer down, there's another layer of delegation. So I am the owner of the root because I created the issue. Then each of the track leads are the people who stepped up as DRI for their themes are the owner of that theme and can add and remove things. Anyone can comment on those issues, it being like, hey, I have a thing to add, but you can decide whether or not you add it. If it becomes deprecated and out of date, you can just be like, cool, that's not in this theme anymore because you're not keeping it accurate and up to date. And similarly, if your theme becomes out of date, we can assign a new theme owner to someone else and drop that theme and keep forking and improving this because it's just all GitHub issues all the way down.
That's okay. To break those kinds of problems, you can always create a separate issue and link it, right? So if you have like an intermediate node that you don't agree on what it should have, you can always create another one that displays precisely what you want. You can solve most of the problems by just creating another issue that links to the right children. The important part is that like you have something that articulates what you want the reader and the viewer to understand, and that you're linking it to the actual completion milestones from that team. And so you can tune for what you want to show.
Okay, we are officially at time for this. So again, thank you all so much for participating. And everyone, you now get like 5 minutes. Bathroom break, track leads. If you haven't done the recap in the closing, you're gonna come up here and present your recap in 3 minutes. So make sure that you stare at your slides and do that right now. And we're gonna get started with the closing in 5 minutes. Thank you.